Hi, my name is Ricardo. Today's topic is going to be about how to regain common sense by triads. A couple of American sociologists, maybe 50 years ago, coined a phrase that reality is socially constructed. I am going to piggyback on that notion and add a few things. I would say that reality is culturally reconstituted by the way we think. By this I mean that if things are going well, that means that our thinking is sound. But if things are not doing well, then our thinking must be flawed. You might say, well, what do you think is the case? Well, it depends whom you ask, but if you ask me, I would say that we're living in an age of crisis. Crisis means that whatever was fueling us up to the present is getting exhausted. And what might be fueling the present? Well, the present is what is called modernity. Modernity comes as an outgrowth from after the Middle Ages. Remember, it came the Renaissance and then Enlightenment, which is the Age of Reason, and we are heirs of the Age of Reason. Of course, there came Romanticism afterwards and a few in between, but basically we are living in the age of modernity. With our reference is Enlightenment. And the reference to that is Renaissance. Renaissance is just a rebirth. So then what we have here is that I wrote 6 books, and in particular 4 of them, but they're a bit long-winded, and in this talk, what I'm going to do is the way I teach it to my middle school and high school students. I don't give them the long-winded version. I simplified it by way of these 2 paintings. The one on my left, called the School of Athens, painted in 1510 by Raphael. It's a fresco in the Vatican. And the one on the right, painted by Jacques David, painted in around 1789, thereabouts, around the time of the Revolution. So this time, the Renaissance, it was very optimistic. They were getting past the Dark Ages. They had just rediscovered our ancestors, which was Greece, let's say. And here on the right, well, that model was beginning to crumble. That naive way of looking at things was crumbling. And this is a critique of this. In what way is it a critique? Well, the version that I say is that the Renaissance people, as portrayed in this painting, are telling us a story that the cradle of the West, or of civilization, is in Athens. What we call the systemic philosophers of Plato and Aristotle. The critique says that you have to go behind that. He's saying, Jacques David is saying, the French Revolution are saying that it's Socrates. But Socrates never wrote anything. So how could it possibly be Socrates if we know Socrates thanks to Plato? So the only way to really know Socrates is to go back to this picture. And we have here Plato and Aristotle as the hub of the cradle of the West, which is Athens, the systemic philosophers. But around them are the pre-Socratic, or the precursors. What this painting is saying is that the precursors, the pre-Socratics, are just like a cloud, They're just background, really nothing. The main actors are Plato and Aristotle, whereas this one is making the claim that no. But look at this one, and you'll see that Socrates is, his arm is pointing up, in contradistinction to Plato, which is doing like this, and his right arm is pointing like this, in contradistinction to Aristotle. Aristotle and Plato here are saying, Plato is saying we know reality because we have ideas, or the theory of forms. Aristotle is saying, no, we know reality because we got 5 senses. So this is the either-or way of thinking. Socrates is heir to the pre-Socratics. That's the whole point of this discussion here, that he is heir And Plato did not really understand Socrates. The Platonic dialogues, or the Platonic dialogues means the dialogues by Plato, but supposedly expressing the ideas of Socrates, he got it wrong, definitely. So what this painting is saying is that Socrates is really conveying the idea of the triad. What is a triad? A triad, we would call it both and. Both this and the hypotenuse. But the hypotenuse is second level, because these two determine humanity, and the second level transcends it and frees us. We are free. The problem with this way of thinking with the either or is that it's machine language. It's ones and zeros, and that's great for programming. But we are human beings, and we need the freedom dimension. So, if that is the case, then we need to go back to the triad idea of the pre-Socratics. Because what happened was that when philosophy or thinking went into the city with a systemic, Aristotle, so to speak, shot the triads. How? He came up with this theory of the three laws of thought, which is the triad by itself, but he didn't know about it. It's a triad made up of the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of the excluded middle. If you exclude the middle, then you fall into the either or, and you kill the both and, which is the triad. So he killed the triad, in effect. And the world that we know, the cradle of modern civilization, is Athens. That's why it's cracking. If we want to construct on a cornerstone that is solid and that is landed in turn on bedrock, we would have to go to the triad. And the triad is of the pre-Socratics as represented by Socrates, because nobody really understood Socrates, at least not these two characters. So, what is the point of all this? The point of all this is that all we need to reconstruct, or to reconstitute rather, the world we know it from its present broken state onto one of wholeness is by triads. And how is that? By common sense. All we need to do is learn common sense by triads, that's all. And unlearn the common sense of either or. That is basically all. Once we do that, once we find out that we are body, mind, and spirit, which is a triad, spirit, body, and mind. Family is also a triad made up of father, mother, child. The city is also a triad made up of neighborhoods, people, okay, and education. Once we understand that the cornerstone of civilization is triad or both and, we'll be back to putting humans, okay, human thinking in charge, on the wheel. So we go back to the first question that we posed about that reality is socially reconstituted by the way we think. If we think by triads, then we will be reconstituting a world from the broken state that it is right now onto a whole state. Well, basically that's it. That all we need is common sense of the triad form and unlearn the corrupted one of the either or, which is just the left brain, the machine taking over in our midst. We have to get past the machine, recover our freedom. And the only way to recover it is by going back to the triads, going back to Socrates, going back to the pre-Socratics, and getting past this apparent or false cornerstone, which has landed us in a lot of problems. Because if the cornerstone is cracked or false, you won't see it, you won't know it till you get to the very high building, high stories, and then you start seeing the cracks. And the way to fix the 100th floor isn't by the 99th floor. It's by going back to the very foundations and what feeds on that foundation. Just like a tree, you don't resolve problems by going to the branches, but by the roots and what feeds the roots, okay? We need to go to values, we need to go to education if we want to build to reconstitute a better world for our children and the children of our children. Thank you very much.